So, my name is Tucker Oldham. I am with Network Data Solutions here in Louisville. I've been in IT for 20 years, selling different types of solutions. For a lot of those years, I've supported ITMA, and I love coming to this event. I call it the FOB event, Friends of Bob event. And the joke I made last year is, you all are friends of Bob, I am too, but I have to pay for it. So, that seemed to go over pretty well, and I'm going to use that every year, I think. But Network Data Solutions, small local company, engineer owned. Our focus is, frankly, you all. IT managers who are struggling their way through what kind of new technologies they need to deploy to meet their business needs, and how do they keep both their end users and their C-level folks happy while doing so. Work with a lot of local companies, both large and small, and primarily in the data center, security and collaboration solutions, and work mainly with Cisco and their Cisco ecosystem. So that's who we are. Want to spend a little bit of time talking about Moore's Law to start out with. Anybody know what Moore's Law is? First off, it's not named after Pat or David Moore, but anybody know what Moore's Law is? Come on, somebody does. There we go, right? Okay. So Moore's Law was started by came up with by a guy who was with Intel, and he realized that every 18 months we doubled our processing power as we developed new processors. Okay? So how does that come into effect? Anybody know what that is?
Guidance system.
Computer.
That is the first hard drive ever made.
Oh.
It was obviously made for mobility. Right? Very first hard drive ever made. It was invented in 1956. It was able to store a whopping 5 meg. It cost $120,000 for 5 meg. Right? And obviously really easy to transport. Okay. Now, the idea with Moore's Law is, again, every 18 months we double our processing power, and the other piece of it is we reduce the cost in half each time around, each time down the line. Okay? Now, how does that play itself out? So, 56, we had 5 megabytes, $120,000. In 2005, everybody remembered these coming out, and we had 128 megs on that little tiny disk, right? As we go into Staples and look at those drives and see those now, what we haven't realized is where it's gone to. 128 gigs over that. Look at the transition. Look at the time, at the exponential growth that we're dealing with these days. It's amazing, right? Same thing happens on the processor side. This is the very first processor. Had 2 transistors in it. I think it had more solder in it than it did. Isn't that amazing? We've gone from 2 transistors to the Intel i7 has 14.4 billion. Wow. Pretty crazy, right? So if I expand, now Moore's Law has worked over 50 years. It has stayed true for 50 years. Double processing power at half the cost every 18 months. Where does that take us? What happens in 2023? Anybody know? So Joey back there in the back corner just went like this. He's pretty close. For $1,000, we'll be able to buy a laptop that has the same processing power as a human brain. We have been talking about technology and thinking about future for a long time. What we're now on the precipice of is all this stuff happening not just in our lifetime, but in a very short period of time. Some of us may live to that age, or that year. What happens that year?
The computers do all the thinking.
That year, for $1,000, if I extend Moore's Law out, that year, that $1,000 laptop has enough processing power to equal all of humankind's brain power. We are talking about, within our lifetimes, sugar cubes with all the processing power of all the Google data centers there are today. And before we think that's out of reach, let us understand that the law has held true for the last 50 years. Great change is upon us. Great change is upon us within within our lifetimes. That's only 10 years old. Our iPhones. Just realize the transformation that we're taking. So why? Yeah, the initial slide deck said I was going to stand up here and talk about security, right? How's all that apply to security? Our world has changed from a security standpoint too. No longer does a firewall and antivirus. Might have worked on the hard drives coming off of an airplane, but we need to transition and transform on the security side of the world too, okay? Great example, real world example of the Moore's Law stuff that I was talking about, okay? How fast technology is being adopted and transformed. Okay? How fast our world is changing. Let's take a good example. For 100 million users to get a telephone, it took us 75 years. It took 16 years for 100 million users to get a smartphone. 7 years for the World Wide Web to be adopted. 4.5 for Facebook. Pokemon took a month. Okay? Our use of technology has increased too. The wonderful Pokemon example broke records on the user side too. Facebook averages 22 minutes a day by an average user. 33 minutes for Pokemon. Now that stat is obviously for the 2 months that Pokemon was huge and you walked up and down Bardstown Road and watched people bang into telephone poles while they were trying to catch Pokemons, right? I mean, obviously the fad came and went. But the adoption rate is insane. Okay? Why does all that have to do with security? This one I have to read because I've yet to be able to memorize it. Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is authorized to act on behalf of the user through an OAuth connection. When launched, the OAuth connection allowed the app, and by extension the vendor, Nintendo, to view, edit, collect, or delete anything related to the user's Google account. Documents, photos, email, search history, location, contacts, and calendar. Send emails, analyze navigation history, exfiltrate and externalize users' data through programmatic API access, collect personal data alongside geotagging and camera access. It's also reported there are several knockoff apps that mimic the original, that leak excessive data. Now, you did that legally. When you downloaded Pokemon Go, you gave Google access to your camera, the ability to send emails, the ability to mine all your data. Where did that Pokemon app go? On your users' iPhones, right? Any secure data that's lying on those iPhones too that you might want to protect? I'm assuming your company's email is on those iPhones. Chances are there are secure documents that your company would like to protect that are sitting on those iPhones. Forget about the hacks. Your user gave legal access to a company to have access to all that data. Now, who knows? Is Nintendo being nefarious with that data? Who knows? But it's a pretty good example of the world that we live in and how fast information can change, right? And how fast it can be taken advantage of. So along with that adoption, new technology, all those sorts of things, the threats that we have out there have changed as well with that technology. They're smarter more than anything else. Okay? No longer are the viruses the main threat. It's the malware, ransomware, things along those lines that are. The threats today come through your firewall or get into your network, but there's a delay before they start their attacks. There's a dwell time. Okay? They are targeting specific information, specific users more than ever before. It's not blanket attacks anymore. Okay? They sit, they wait. The average attack today takes 100 days for the average attack to be detected within your environment. According to Cisco, 65% of organizations today don't even realize that they've happened. Their security tools haven't been able to catch whatever the invasion was. 55% weren't able to determine the cause of the breach. Not only were you not able to figure out that it was coming into your network, you have no idea how it got into your network in most cases. Scary stuff, right? One of my favorite slides, simply because of this. Antivirus today has gotten to the point where it is less than 45% effective. How many folks here, security posture is a great firewall and antivirus on the desktops? Got a few folks shaking their heads, the others are too scared to. Particularly when it comes to small business, medium-sized business, whoever the company is that you talk to out in the room next door, chances are we're going to tell you that's what we see all the time. Okay? We've got to take other steps. We've got to realize that the threats are evolving at a dramatic rate. So we have to take other steps from a security perspective. No longer can we take the approach of, I'm trying to keep everything out. The reality is, if it ain't on your desktops right now, it's headed that direction. The folks that say they haven't had a breach are part of that 65% who haven't been able to detect it. Because they're there. They just are. Use some analogies to talk through this. A lot of us, particularly on this side of the industry, 7 to 10 years ago, would have experts come in and talk to us about how to explain security through different illustrations. And one of those illustrations was a house. And the idea was that you needed to secure your network much the way you do your house. Locked doors for a firewall. Maybe cameras to watch what threats are out there to come your way. We would always talk about a dog that would yap if they heard something, right? Those are different ways we secure the outside of our house. And that's been effective on the business side. Okay? Now, what we have done is we have built our networks so they're extremely secure from threats from the outside in. So no longer do we use necessarily the house example, let's use a bank example. Okay? Our banks, I mean, I can drive a dump truck into that thing, and I'm not going to hurt it, right? We've built this huge, hard perimeter on the outside. I've got cameras all over the place, okay? Making sure I see whatever threats are out in my parking lot, ready to attack. The only way that you get in is through really secure methods coming in and out. On a bank, I've got things like deposit boxes. Okay? What we have not thought about, and what I challenge you to think about when you're securing your bank, wrong computer, is the inside. How many of you all think about how I detect a threat on the inside of my network? Okay? When's the last time you walked in a bank and there were no security apparatus inside the bank? We don't walk in and just grab a pile of cash and walk out, right? There are windows up, there are tellers up to secure. There's that big vault back in the back. Okay? Anybody seen one of these at a bank? I used to bank at PNC on Bardstown Road. And one day walked in and had to walk into this little turret. You walk in, the door behind you closes. There's a camera up at the top. And somebody looks at you through the camera, and then the front door opens. And that's how you got into the bank. Now that branch has since closed. PNC bought National City, and for a while there was a PNC every quarter mile up Bardstown Road, and they closed a bunch of those. But I asked, I had a real good friend, or has become a friend, who worked at that branch, and always helped us with our banking. I asked her, why on earth did you all get that new door? That thing's crazy. And her answer was, we were robbed 3 times in the last month. And that put them on a target of a high-risk branch with PNC. So PNC walked in and put in this turret, high-security door. So, you can be reactionary like PNC, and after you've been broken into 3 times, do something about it. Or maybe start to develop a security plan. I don't want to be up here and say you need to be doing all the things that I'm talking about immediately, but what you do need to do is go back and think about security in terms of a plan. It's not a single product or part that you're going to buy to put into your network. It's that layered approach of different things that you need within your network. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's give some real world example and kind of walk through that. So I've got the internet. First thing I do when I put in my network to connect to the outside world is I put in a firewall, right? Most of you all have probably invested in next generation firewall. If you haven't, we certainly need to talk. That firewall usually does VPN, so I connect remote end users or remote branches into my headquarters. I've put in IPS or IDS so I can detect through packet inspection threats that are coming into my network. If you buy a Cisco firewall, that goes a little bit deeper, and that packet inspection is reporting threats up the chain, and it's updated on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, really, with Cisco's Talus solution, so that all the Cisco devices are updated. I can also do a lot of reporting, things along those lines through that Firepower module. You may be using that next-gen firewall for web filtering, keeping people away from all the fun sites, right? The gambling and the porn and all the other stuff out there. Next thing I put into my network is a switch, right? And I might have security in mind when I'm putting in that switch. So I have VLAN things off, keeping things secure from even the switch perspective. Not a lot you do here, but there is some. A lot of the compliancy requirements say that you need to be updating the firmware on those devices on a regular basis. So I have security in mind even when I'm working on my LAN. Then put in a wonderful server. I'm very, very concerned about the security on the server. So I make sure that I have the latest OS. I'm keeping update. I'm doing patch updates. I'm doing what I need to do on my on the server side. Then put in my storage device. One of the big things that we've dealt with the last couple of years from a compliancy standpoint is encryption at rest. That's a requirement that we've seen particularly bank auditors harp on. Healthcare field, if you are a HIPAA compliant business, encryption at rest has been a very hot topic. But you make sure you keep your firmware updates, and you make sure that you're encrypting all your data there on the storage side, right? This is kind of the traditional sense of the traditional network so far, okay? On the desktop side, I've got my antivirus. out there looking for threats. I have a Microsoft server that's keeping my updates all the time. And I make sure I don't have Windows XP still running in my environment. I'm running something that gets updated from a security patch standpoint all the time, right? You've done a wonderful job securing this network. You really spent both money and time ensuring that the threats that are coming from the internet are dealt with on a timely manner. And I'm trying to keep everything out. Again, I've built an awesome bank. That's my bank, right? Anybody got that guy that works in their office? Okay. Since Bob's not here, we're going to call that guy Bob. Okay? Bob on a Sunday afternoon tells you, the IT guy, that he's working from home. All right? Now, we talked about the firewall having VPN, and he VPNs back in, right? That's how we used to do it. Our Exchange server sat here. The only way we let Bob on his couch get into our network was VPN access back in. Okay? How many folks now still have an Exchange server on site? Ooh, 3. Okay? Bob connects to the internet. Bob, instead of going to his Exchange server through a VPN connection, now goes to the cloud, to Office 365. How does your bank secure Office 365? Those 3 guys that raise their hands now feel a lot smarter, don't they? Right? Yeah, see, they're over there whispering, hey, maybe we don't go down that route. We budgeted for Office 365 this year. Bob tells you he's going to Office 365 on Sunday afternoon. Bob's not. Bob is taking his laptop, logging in to see how his fantasy football team did. He is going to Yahoo. Right? Now, how many folks here, and you have to be honest, how many folks here play fantasy football? I got a few. Okay? How many folks are on Yahoo for fantasy football? A few. Okay? Up in the right-hand corner of the fantasy football website, what does it say? What's the icon? Anybody know? Anybody remember? I know it's summer, so nobody's looked at their. There's a mail icon up there. Connects into your Yahoo Mail account. Okay? While Bob is watching Red Zone and checking on his fantasy scores, he notices all the email that he's neglected in his Yahoo Mail account. Okay? So Bob clicks on Yahoo Mail. Bob opens his browser and gets this email. Dear Bob, your parcel was successfully delivered January 29th to UPS station, but our courier could not contact you. Notice could isn't even spelled right. Right? Please check the attachment for complete details. Okay? Now, as much as we can sit here and analyze this email, while the Packers are scoring, what's Bob going to do? He's going to click that attachment. Okay? How many folks have dealt with this within their environment? A lot of hands raised on that one. Those folks that didn't, might be a part of that 65% that can't detect it. So Bob clicks on it. Bob now has a file on his computer. That ransomware file is now on his computer. Sunday afternoon, it's in Bob's PC. Bob walks away. Monday morning comes in and plugs his laptop into his docking station. Fires it up with that ransomware still on. What in your environment right now has the ability to catch that file that came into your network? Understand, we're not talking about something that came in through here. We're talking about a laptop that came in your front door and plugged in to your network. Authorized user. What happens to that file? That file starts to move. Once it's moved, we start getting these little messages. Once my end users get all those messages asking them that they have 11 hours and 58 minutes to make a payment, or their files are gone forever, those start to spread. And those start to end up on all my files across all my networks. Famous stories out there about all this, right? Okay. We hear about ransomware. What was the last one? The WannaCry virus, CryptoLocker. We hear about the hospital out in California that ransomware hit them and they were down for 2 weeks. We just had one within the last couple of months over in London. Similar sorts of things, okay? I guarantee you the bank, the quote bank at a hospital is a little bit tougher bank than what you all have in your all's environments. And yet, we're still allowing things, authorized users to come in from the outside. Right? Scary stuff, right? So let's talk about that layered security approach. Okay? Bob gets on his laptop on that Sunday afternoon. And the first thing I would tell you to look at is some sort of service that checks his DNS. That uses DNS for a security measure. Okay? Before a file is downloaded, before an email comes in, before Bob goes to a website, a DNS request is made in the cloud, right? There are services out there that check those DNS records against databases of known threats. Okay? So the idea being that Bob, whether he is on his couch or in the office, no matter what, he is going to a place that is checking the websites or the addresses that he is going to. See if they're secure. Okay? One of the easiest ways to figure out if a site is secure or not is to see if it's a new address, new web address. Okay? Those hackers are using brand new DNS addresses as their sites. Okay? 3 million new DNS records are created each day. Okay? Is there a legitimate business reason that some of your end users ought to be going to a site that was created that very day? Chances are no, right? If I have a solution in place that is checking that, when Bob gets, when Bob gets that email, a lot of them are these zip files, but a lot of them will have a link in them, just going to a site to download whatever the program is. If I have a solution in place that is checking those web addresses to make sure they're legit, I might be able to stop this attack from the beginning, right? But let's assume that we don't catch it that way, okay? We need a solution beyond antivirus on the laptop itself that understands what is typical behavior, what is atypical behavior, beyond an antivirus, okay? We need some advanced malware solutions that are able to not only catch the virus piece of it, but also the malware, okay? There are solutions out there that do that are updated on a constant basis that we help customers deploy on the endpoint itself, so that we've moved beyond the antivirus piece, okay? Let's assume that it is a day zero bug that has hit Bob's computer, okay? When that day zero bug goes into the network and I plug that laptop into my docking station, there are solutions that we sell that are NAC solutions, Network Admission Control Solutions. When I plug that laptop into the docking station, and I log in, before I am allowed access to all my files, those NAC solutions are checking that laptop to see, do I have all the updates that I need? Have I done all the patches? Can I verify that you are that end user? Okay? Or am I just allowing a laptop to plug into any Ethernet port on my network? No. He should be plugged into this Ethernet port. I'm giving him access to these things. If I am searching his PC to make sure everything's up to date. If it's not, I'm going to quarantine it. Or I'm going to notify the network administrator. Right? So let's assume, again, Bob still has that file, but he's done everything he's supposed to do, so that PC is allowed onto my network. Okay? And that file still starts to propagate. Okay? The security solutions that we're deploying today not only know that that file is here on this PC, but as it starts to propagate, I know the trajectory through my entire network of where that file has been. So that when I do get that update, I know what cleanup I need to do on my network. What steps do I have to take to make sure my network is clear? Okay? A lot of times we talk about going to backups and things like that. That's business disrupting, right? We want to be able to go to these machines, get them cleaned as soon as possible, know what's happened at a file level to understand what cleanup that we have to do. Okay? After all of that is complete, I want to be able to update the rest of the users out there, that this virus is out there, and block those next instances of that coming through, right? So the solutions that we work with are not only here at the desktop level, but they then report up the chain. Okay? So again, we talked about that day zero malware that's hit us, okay? It got through every one of these various stages, right? And it got out onto my PCs, and I had those different files made it onto those PCs. Now I've gone and cleaned up all those, but for the next customer in line, I don't want this to be a day zero event. I want it to be known out there on the network, okay? So the solutions that we're deploying start at the endpoint, but they report up the chain, okay? So, malware then hits the firewall, and it's updated the firewall, okay? So if that file comes through my firewall, now my whole network is protected from that file, and it doesn't come down the chain, right? In addition to that, it goes up, and I talked about that cloud solution that's protecting my individual, all the addresses out there. I've updated that database. So now the next Bob that comes around is protected immediately because he's not allowed to even get that email from that address, right? Or download that file to begin with, okay? So theoretically, if everybody are using the solutions that we're talking about, as soon as one threat gets out there on one laptop, I've updated the world that that threat is out there. Okay? I say theoretically. Everybody's heard about WannaCry, right? The solutions that we were deploying were updated with the WannaCry virus as a part of that database of threats within 7 minutes of its release. Okay? What was the time of detection for most businesses? I had a giveaway for this, guys. I know it's early, but y'all seem like you were paying attention. Average business detects a threat 100 days. Got a prize for you. Thank you for participating. Okay? 7 minutes to 100 days. Which end of that spectrum do you think you all want to be on? Right? The approach is not a single device. It is a layered approach that you must take if you want to be successful in a security environment. It's not keeping things out anymore as much as you want to do that. It is also about detection. In most businesses that we're working with, that detection piece is where they're lacking right now. Okay? If you want to talk to me about specific solutions, about your specific needs in your business, I'll be around most of the day. We can talk through how much of this approach you have already deployed and what areas you might want to take a look at. Okay? Not talking about forklifting what you've done from a security perspective. What you've done from a security perspective is probably excellent. Okay? But what you need to think about are those gaps. Okay? Thank you all for your time.